hopefully I started recording. So anyway, what I wanted to address is what I see as an ongoing trend, if you will, in that people are missing the basics of model building to come up with quantity versus quality. And as a judge, and I've been a judge now for close to 30 years, we see a lot of things where what is on the table, you kind of scratch your head and you kind of go, so what are you thinking? And things that are incredibly important, like making sure the mold lines are gone, making sure that this, indentations are filled, things like that, are just being missed. And then people come up to you afterwards and go, well, why didn't I win? I think mine, is better than his. And, and the reality is he paid better attention to the basics. And it starts with body prep and knowing what you're building. And a lot of times we see, guys who just really want to see how many models they can build in a short period of time. We had a guy on one of the Facebook groups 4 or 5 years ago, and he's since passed away. But he decided that one year he was going to see how many models he could build, and he built 353 models.
Holy cow.
And 353 models looked like he built 353 models.
We had a guy like that in our club.
The things like the basics, removing mold lines, doing any detail finishing, so on and so forth, all went by the wayside. And everything was done with tester rattle can enamel, and everything looked like he had built 353 models in a year. And it got to the point where you really hated to log into the group because you were afraid to see what he had done next. And even when people kind of were nice about saying, hey, could you, he really kind of got, really upset over it and kind of got pissy about, as to what you were doing and so on and so forth, and figured people were being nasty and they're critiquing. And so right now there's a group on Facebook where we're in the middle of April right now, and a guy has already completed 14 models for the year. And one of the things about digital photography is that you can take and snap, tap on the picture, expand it out, and you can look and see what has or hasn't been done. And, the first couple of models the guy did, you kind of went, okay, well, maybe he's going to get better. And, then you see models that are done that it has such horrible mold lines on it. You were like, how could you possibly have done that? And the reality of it is that, quality went by the wayside in order to see how many models you can produce in a year. So I thought, well, let's talk about just doing some routine kind of getting ready to build a model. And one of the things that I always do is to go over a particular piece and figure out where the mold lines are. And a Sharpie pen becomes your favorite little tool, because you can go with a Sharpie and mark out your mold lines. And what this does is it will keep you from forgetting about them, because it's always going to be there until you remove it. And it will also help you to see that you have indeed gone through and removed the mold lines. And this set of fenders is from an AMT 40 Ford sedan, or this was a sedan delivery because the center is taken out here. But this is probably one of the more extreme pieces that's out there. And the mold lines, this thing has probably been produced 2 million times in its lifetime since the mid-1960s when they first released it. And the molds have not been refreshed, and they're just in absolutely deplorable shape. But it's a great piece, and you just need to go through and correct it. And so if you go through and mark out your mold lines with a Sharpie, what ends up happening is that when you go back over them, that you literally remove the Sharpie line as you're removing the mold line. And it will also, when you're done, in theory, removing the Sharpie line, if there's an area where you need to put some filler in, the Sharpie line's still going to be there. And it will, guide you as to what you need to do to take care of it. And these are 100, 180 grit, depending on which side you use, fingernail polish or fingernail files. And I buy these at Sally Beauty. And if you're a Sally Beauty member, you can buy a bag of 48 of these for like $32. Or if you're not a Sally Beauty member, they'll be happy to sell them to you for $1.59 a piece. And Sally Beauty, their annual be part of their club is $5. So for $5 you can save, $20 easily right off the top. So it's an easy thing to do. And if you happen to walk in at just the right time, they're going to go, "Do you want to be a Sally Beauty member?" And you kind of go, "Eh." And they look at what you have and they go, "Well, you could save." And you're kind of like, "Well, okay, that makes it appealing." And then they tell you, "Oh, we're at 50% off today." So your normal $5 Sally Beauty membership now costs you $2.50, and you save a whole lot of money. So I highly recommend it. But the thing about it is the two that I brought today have been severely used. They're beat to death, and so realistically they're probably now in the 160 to 180 range, and probably more like 240. And but the nice thing about it is that you can go through it and it will quickly remove the Sharpie line, and by doing this you'll end up you're removing the Sharpie line. You'll take down the mold line as well. And as you can see with this one, even though the mold line is gone, there is still areas that still show up, still have Sharpie in it. And so with this, we're going to go back and do some filler in order to correct the issue. And depending upon what it is, I use one of two fillers. This is old-fashioned stuff. This was noted as being sprue goo back in the 1960s. And with that, people were using acetone, MEK, all kinds of good carcinogenic type materials to make this. And what happens is that they were literally taking and cutting up pieces of sprue from kits, dumping it into the acetone or MEK, and it dissolves, and it becomes liquid. So you have effectively liquid styrene. So this is nothing but scrap evergreen styrene. This started out as a single piece of 1/4-inch square evergreen about 2 years ago, and it made about a quarter of that. And that's what this started out as in one of these little 2-ounce bottles. It was about half full of Tamiya extra thin cement, and a piece of 1/4-inch square styrene stuffed down in it, cut up and stuffed down in it, and let it sit for overnight, and the next day I had styrene putty. So as you can see, over the course of a couple of years, it's now grown considerably. But the thing about it is that when you use this, the really nice thing about it is that once it's there, being your dissolving agent is the extra thin cement, that when you put this in, you are not only putting the styrene in there, but you're also gluing it in there. And realistically, it takes 24 hours to dry, so it's not for someone who wants to throw it in and go, oh, okay, I need to sand this out in 10 minutes. You ain't going to be sanding it out in 10 minutes. It ain't going to happen. And people who are accustomed to using, two-part polyester putty, this is not two-part polyester putty by any stretch of the imagination. The nice thing about this is if you screw the paint job up and you have to throw it in the stripper, that once this is in there, it's in there. All of the fillers, I don't care what it is, it will act with the styrene, but it will not become part of the styrene, where this does. And even using my second kind of the backup go-to, which is 3M acrylic, or 3M, it's their what they call Acryl White, which is an acrylic white glazing putty. Stuff works phenomenally. It is absolutely beautiful. It feathers fabulously. I use it as finishing putty. It works very, very well. It will effectively set up in about an hour. You can go back and work in an hour, but you can also, sand through it. And if you have to have them to strip it, well, guess what? You have to go back and you have to redo all your putty again. So if you're doing any real extensive body work on it, use this. And the worst part of this is just, waiting for it, if you will, to either set or to melt in the first place. And this is just a double-sided dental spatula. Picked it up at down at the Oregon State Fair at the tool peddler down there. I think I paid like $1.25 for it or something like that. So you put it on, set it aside, go on and do something else. And you come back to it 6-8 hours tomorrow, whatever the case may be. It's going to be
blow dryer or heat gun, anything to speed it up?
It will. I've thrown it into a dehydrator, and I've got one of the factory set dehydrators, which is 102 degrees, and it will dry it within probably about 3 hours. And but I'm not usually in that big a hurry, so it sits and waits for a while. And so that's what happens with something if you're going through and you sand it out and you suddenly discover that hey, I still got Sharpie lines still there. There's a dip in the plastic at the mold line, and one of the things you'll find with the 40 Ford fender assembly is that there is when it comes together, it kind of meets like this. Instead of being a nice smooth transition and with the mold line in it, it kind of meets like this. And so you find that you have to go through and recontour that in order to get it to flow the way that it should, so it's a nice smooth surface. Otherwise you end up with this, and it kind of does one of these things. And but it's like I say, it's probably had 2 million shots through that mold by now, and I don't think it's ever been refreshed, to be quite honest. And but it's just one of those things that happens. One of the other bodies I pulled out, and this was bought specifically for the wheels. This is Revell's version of the Chrysler Copperhead show car. The nice thing about the Revell version of it is the wheels are chrome, has some really good disc brakes in it, and but the rest of the body you're gonna go into the junk box, because who cares? But the nice thing about it is that it's good for demonstration purposes, because if you feel on the edges of this thing, you can notice that there is a spot where the mold pieces come together, and literally they kind of come together like this at a 90-degree angle a lot of places. And the reality is on a full-size car that metal doesn't do that. When you put metal together, even if there are pieces coming together, there's a nice transition to it. And on plastic, it's literally like butts up against one another. You end up with this 90-degree transition, and you've got to get rid of that in order to make it noticeable that you've gone through and done some work to it. And there's a fair amount of just excess to this body, and it's probably one of the more extreme ones. and it's designed for for the snap type market. It's for people who don't really care. Mostly they're anticipating the kids are going to build it, and mom and dad really don't want to care. They don't want to be part of it. They just want here, Junior, go build this and leave me alone. And the thing about it is that it has the potential to be a nice model, but not the way that they built it. This is the AMT 32 Victoria, and the back of this is absolutely horrible. I can't remember if AMT has ever refreshed this mold. I don't believe they ever have. So it's probably the original 1965 mold. And again, it's probably had 2 million test shots run through it. And you have this the bustle in the back of it. There are just massive mold lines down the back of the body that you really need to remove because it's a nice transitional flow around the body. And so it's just a lot of things that just need to be reworked. Expect that when you're working with something like this, set aside an hour to go through and look at the body, go over it with your Sharpie, put the lines on it, go back and gently remove it. And there's a lot of things you can use. I've got tape out here. Tape is one of those things that, if you're really concerned about the area around where you're working, tape it off. The blue painter's tape works well. Problem with it is it tends to be thick. And the Tamiya yellow tape, the masking tape from Tamiya, stuff is nice and thin. It adheres well, and especially if you're painting, that stuff is phenomenal. I'll use that any day over the blue painter's tape. They make some of this in green. If you're using this in green, have a come along to get it off. This stuff, when it comes off, it will take every bit of paint and everything else that's underneath it. The stuff literally just, I don't know what it is about it, but the adhesive to it is unreal. It is just unbelievable as to how strong it is. But a lot of times what you'll find is that when you're doing some of these is that you go through and you remove the mold lines and you start to paint it, and suddenly your mold lines are back. And that's one of the major frustrations with some of these models. And what happens with it is styrene has memory. And so what you have to do to make so that the effort that you put forward is not wasted is to go back and release that memory out of the styrene. And that's where your liquid styrene cement comes in handy. Go through, sand out your mold lines, go back over it with the applicator brush, lay some liquid styrene down where the mold line was at, let it dry, go back, lightly sand it, make sure it's smooth, and chances are your mold lines won't reappear. If they do, that's where you go to the gap filling CA and put a drop on it, take and run it over with your thumb, your finger, keep your paper towel sandy, and and go over with the CA. Once the CA sets, go back and feather the edges of it to where that you can can get rid of that. The mold lines will not reappear then, I'll guarantee. I've never seen a mold line ever come through CA. Every once in a while it'll show back up out of this. There's nothing you can do about it. And if it comes back when you do this, definitely go to the CA. It won't show back up. And so lots of different sanding products out there. Like I said, the 100, 180 grit sanding sticks, they're basically fingernail files. From Sally Beauty, I use a lot of these. Like I said, I'll go buy a bag of 48 of them for $32, and that'll last me for 2 or 3 years. Also, a product I found probably about 10 years ago now, when I was in Chicago for training, was these little sanding sticks that are these things cut into little strips. And I was at a hobby shop in like northeast Chicago on a weekend, trying to waste some time while I was there, stuck for 3 weeks for training. And they had a bag put out by Stevens International, which is a model railroad company, that had sanding sticks in it, varying grits and widths and so on and so forth. And these things, the blue ones are 120, 240. They also have them in white that are 240, 320, and then they have them in gray that are 320, 400. And I pick these up all the time at Hobby Lobby. I think they're $6.99 for a bag of 20 of them or something like that. The nice thing about them is that you get down to the point where you start to cut, to wear through them, because you will literally wear the grit off of them, like I have with this one. And you grab the pair of scissors out, and you cut it down, and you now have a newly available piece to go through and start sanding again. So, one of your best friends. These I bought probably 10 years ago at the Kershaw knife sale, when Kershaw knives used to be down in Wilsonville. And I think these were like $25 at a fly fishing store. And I bought them at Kershaw for like $2.75. I bought a whole bunch of these. One of the things that we see as judges a lot of is people will go through, they'll, especially the engine-based stuff, they'll go through, they'll put in spark plug wires, they'll put in return springs, they'll put in throttle linkage, they'll put in all the fuel lines, on and on and on and on and on. They'll put in air conditioning lines, they'll put in, lines off of generators, alternators, everything else, and then they don't take the mold lines off of headers. They don't take the mold lines off of the exhaust system. They don't take the mold line off of the radiator. And as a judge, when I look at somebody's engine compartment and there's a mold line on their, on the top tank of the radiator, I lose interest. You didn't cover the bases that you should have. You went to all this trouble. You spent hours, and I know that it takes hours to do this stuff. You spent hours, but you couldn't be bothered to spend 10 minutes to correct, an issue that comes about by, the injection molding process. So a lot of times, a model is good. It's better than a lot of stuff on the table, but it has one major flaw that every judge looks at and goes, yeah, no, that's not going to work. And yet people come up to you afterwards and go, but I did. And it's like, yeah, but you didn't do this. And like I say, digital photography, your camera phones, some of your best friends, to be quite honest, take a picture of what it is you're working on, take and spread it out, enlarge the picture, see what it looks like. You'll be amazed at the number of flaws that you find in your own work. And you're like, damn, I thought I took care of that. And it was like, missed it by that much. And, and it's stuff that's available to all of us. And if you're not using it, it doesn't make a lot of sense. This is the exhaust off of a 54 pickup. And you can feel in the along the exhaust pipes, the mold lines, that are there. And if you're putting it into a judge contest, the judge takes a look at it, and you can see it, especially when you paint those. They've just become, like, hey, here I am, and and then you put it into a judge contest, and the judge goes, yeah, nice try. And and they just they pan whatever it is you're doing. And so it's little things that people miss that are incredibly important. And I'm sure we could go out here and probably find models on the table that have those kind of flaws in it. We're not on a judge contest, so that's good. But still, there's enough judge contests around that people are really cognizant of what's going on. Those of us who are judges have been around the hobby for a while. I know that the the majority of us who judge for contests that SABA sponsor or we promote. I think I'm probably one of the new guys, and I've been doing it since I was 6, and I'm 63 now. I've been judging for since the mid '90s. So we've been around for a while and have seen a lot of things. Some of the other guys, Ron, who's the club president, has he's 74 now or something like that, and he's been a judge literally since the 70s. It's like when we get together to judge Ron, myself, and a couple other guys, it's like, suddenly we've got, 120, 150 years of judging experience. And, are we critical? Yeah, sometimes a little more than we probably should be. But other times we're lenient as well. It just kind of depends on what it is. But, some major things, and I see it a lot, especially in groups on Facebook, and in the new digital age, where people have just forgotten some of the basics. A few years ago, I stepped on a lot of people's toes at our Portland Classic because I made the statement that stuff that they had entered didn't deserve a participation ribbon, and that was truly how I felt about it. It was kind of like, guys, you missed the important things. Gobs of paint that were, glue that were there that, you kind of went, what is it you're trying to do? And instead of, being good, smooth transition from one piece to another, and it was one of those you kind of scratch your head with. And, things like aluminum foil tape that people had used for trim that was rolling back, and you're kind of like, why did you enter this? That made no sense whatsoever. But it's one of those that, like I say, we see a lot of things. And you kind of scratch your head sometimes and kind of go, I'm not sure why. But other pieces I brought today. This is the frame out of a Revell 29 Ford pickup. What was left of this kit was handed to me because someone had attempted to start to put it together. It's a prime example of not prepping a piece before you start to build it. I have taken it apart to the point that it can be salvaged, but when I first got this, it was like, why is all of that glued together? And the nice thing about it was that the person who gave it to me knew that I was looking for a closed cab pickup, and the person who started to build this had decided to use the roadster pickup without a body on it. So at least I had a good closed cab pickup to start with. Things like the frame sights. Every model out there that Revell has a separate frame for like this. There are dips in the frame. It's all short pores, if you will, and it's because of the fact that they didn't put enough into the injection mold, and they're able to save a penny here and a tenth of a penny there, and what ends up happening is that you end up with these sink marks in the insides of the frame, and so your solution is go through, sand it down as much as possible, go back with your filler, no matter what you're using, your standard filler. Fill that in, sand it back out, make it nice and smooth. In a judge contest, it's one of those things that I look for. When I see somebody building something that has an exposed frame, I want to see that frame is is nice and smooth. And if it's not, then you kind of get panned for it. But
A question. When you do pick up used kits, and sometimes you do get some that have been really gooped on glue. Do you have any tricks for cleaning that?
The biggest thing that I use if I get a quote unquote glue bomb is to take it apart as far as you can without breaking pieces, and then and put it into a Ziploc bag. Put a couple of drips of water in it. Take it and run it under water first. Put it in the Ziploc bag. and put some water in the bag, throw it in the freezer for a day. And you'll find that when you go back to it, chances are that the expanding water is enough that it will literally break those pieces apart and it won't destroy them in the process. It works very, very well. I've used it for literally years now, and it's the most effective way I've ever found to do it, because some of these things, when you get to some of the older cement, yeah, you ain't breaking it apart. I don't care how gentle you are. Your best option is to to start with a razor saw and start cutting it apart, because it's so with a razor saw and start cutting it apart because of the fact that it's so glued together. But I found that by using the water method and putting it in the freezer and letting the freezer do the work for you, that 9 times out of 10 it comes apart perfectly
So
fine.
the parts, like let's say this is a flat piece that's just got a glob on it. Will that actually come off into it?
It can, depending entirely upon if there's enough airspace underneath it, if you will, that the water can get under it. It will literally, the expansion will force it away. Sometimes you're going to find the only thing you can do is to cut it or sand it free. That's the only thing you can do to it. And it's just one of those things.
That dissolves.
No. Now, there used to be a product years ago that was for dissolving plastic cement, and suddenly it disappeared off the market. And I think the reason it did is because it's one of those, known to cause cancer in California substances, and so you kind of shy away from things like that just because it's, I don't know, it's like we're around enough deadly substances that is. Why go for one that actually says, hey, it's known to cause cancer, so let's keep away from that. One of the things when you're going through and working on, I already pulled it out, working on mold lines, and especially if your mold line is as such that the mold line goes over top of a body panel or something, make sure you go back and scribe out the panel. You'll find that by doing this, even as you start, before you start sanding too deep in it, you'll actually preserve the body panel line, and it will give you the ability to have that show up when you're painting it. Because a lot of these, unfortunately, when you sand to get rid of the mold lines, you may end up actually just destroying the panel line completely. And it's easier to put the panel line in and deepen it before you start sanding it than to try to recover it later. The backside of a number 11 X-Acto blade is sometimes your best friend. Make sure it's sharp, make sure it's got a tip on it, because if you go through this and you're too heavy-handed with it, you'll snap the blade off, pitch it and get another one. Lighten up your stroke on it. And you can go through and you can actually open panels up that way if you're so inclined. But the biggest thing is just going through and just kind of making sure that I kind of hate to use the term basics are taken care of. IPMS, they use a term called fit and finish. And that's kind of what we're getting at is, make sure that the things fit, make sure that they're finished well. And you'll find that once that is done, that the building the model then becomes, something you can really take pride in. It becomes a piece of art instead of just another build. And, some of us, I may finish 1 or 2 models a year. And it's just because of the fact that, the amount of time that I'm willing to put into it, the amount of time that I'm willing to spend. Another thing I do a lot of research on things. And I find all the time that people will go through and lay down bare metal foil or something on a model, and you kind of scratch your head and go, why? Well, because that's what it should be. And you're kind of like, so did you actually look at the model, the car that you're building before you decided to do this? And it's like, I drive a Chevy Tahoe, and Chevy Tahoe has no chrome around the windows. The wiper blades are black, And I think AMT or Revell, I don't remember which, did a snap together Tahoe probably 25 years ago. And I saw one at a show one day, and somebody had gone through and they'd put bare metal foil around all the windows and across the wiper blades, and you're kind of like, nice try, but. And the other thing we see a lot of, and it may be trivial, but it makes a difference as to what you see, is I see a lot of people who will go through and they're scared to death of foil. And I can appreciate that. I've been there. There are times like bare metal foil is like, the last thing in the world I want to even consider doing. And you ask them about using it, and they're like, oh no, I'm strictly I'm using nothing but chrome silver. And you're kind of like, okay, then why did you chrome silver the wiper blade itself? And it's like, well, what do you mean? It's like, wiper blades are black. And they're like, I never thought of that. And it's like, well, unless you're shopping at a different store than I am, they're black. And is it trivial? Yeah. Is it nitpicky? Yeah. But, one of the things that I've always kind of gone by, and it just may be me, is that, we're building static display models. They're not toys, and so on and so forth. So, the more correct you can be, makes it so that judges are more inclined to give you the nod when it comes to award time, than putting together a toy. And it's like I say, it's some things are trivial. One of the things I wanted to cover is when it comes to sanding this stuff out is if you don't have sanding sticks, if you have tongue depressor like popsicle sticks, you can take and wrap your sandpaper around the stick, and then you can use the tape to secure it with. And the nice thing about it is that it will allow you to have some strength and some rigidity to your sanding. Because one of the things that happens, and we all do it, is you'll be sanding away and suddenly you realize, oh, I just sanded that entire ridge off. And so your options are, gee, do I go back and do I rebuild it, or just do I pretend that it was never there? Where if you have something that gives you some rigidity to your sanding paper, or whatever the case may be, you'll find that it gives you a little more substance to work with. And when I go buy sandpaper, I'll buy the variety pack that gives you 220, 400, 600, 800, and 1,000. A 5-sheet pack. And I've got lots of 220 around because I seldom ever use 220. The 400, 6, 8, and 1,000 get used up like crazy. So if I'm using sandpaper to do my body work with, it ends up getting used up faster than anything else. And so then everything is then worked from that. And just one thing to remember when you're sanding this is that every time you sand something, you're leaving scratches behind. And so every time that you go to a finer grit sandpaper, you're removing scratches from the previous one, but you're adding some new scratches. And so take it down to the point where you feel that with your thumb or with the palm of your hand that it is pretty decently smooth. Then at that point, go through and do your primer. Take a look at your bodywork, make sure that it's what you want it to be, and then proceed from there. A lot of times that we'll see where someone's gone through with really aggressive sandpaper, and they'll go through and knock something down, and then they'll just leave the scratch marks there and hope that they use enough high build primer to resolve it. Never works that way. You always end up leaving it behind, and it's apparent. So, but just little things. you know, nothing spectacular. And if you're looking for some decent putty to use, I highly recommend the 3M Acryl White. 3M makes this in whites, in red and blue. They also used to make it in a green. The green they don't make anymore. And depending upon what it is you're looking for, the different colors gives you the texture of it. The white is the finest, and when you sand it out, it will give you the best finish. It will feather the best. I highly recommend using it in a ventilated area, because believe me, if you use it in the front room, the first thing that's going to happen is your significant other is going to go, "What the hell are you doing?" Because it stinks. It is really, really stinky, but it works well. I buy this at Baxter's. It's like, I think I paid $28 for this tube. It's a 14-ounce tube. The last one I bought 15 years ago dried up before I used it all. So it's money well spent. It's a great product. The nice thing about it is it doesn't shrink, which is like a major issue with a lot of fillers. And even if you were to, I know people, you know, they still want to use the Bondo red filler, and you know, it's perfectly fine. At least go to the money and buy the 3M red, or there's another stuff called Dr. Nitro, Nitro Stand, that works well. It's a red putty. Does not it shrinks, but not as much as what the Bondo does, and the 3M stuff doesn't shrink at all. It's definitely worth the effort. But a lot of stuff out there. You know, keep your towels handy. You'll find that you end up using a lot of those. And so just like I say, guys, the big thing is attention to detail. You know, just getting through, you know, making your build worth your time, something you can be proud of, and you know, and go from there.